Hello, my dearest members. We are back with some more Social Stud Live post show. We're going to be doing the post show for episode 3, which I'm really excited about. I have something fun and hopefully unique, something that maybe you haven't seen yet. It's not something that I've seen a whole lot of yet. This is an episode that I've definitely not seen. I saved it for you guys to share with you so we could have this experience together. One concern I had with doing this on the main show is that I really don't know how likely this would be to get claimed or stricken by the YouTube police. I have no idea. I had bad luck with the Jurassic Park movie, not the Jurassic Park movie, the Lost World movie that was definitely in the public domain at the time I was watching. So I had a little bit of trouble with that. So I don't know what's okay and what's not. And I didn't want anything taking down the stream again. So I thought, if this is uncertain, I'll just do it on the post show. And then I can upload it separately and see what happens. See if YouTube goes after it. If it gets demonetized, whatever. It's not like having a whole stream demonetized over one segment. It's not nearly as big of a deal. So this is going to be really cool, though. This was brought to my attention by my professor, who actually wrote a book that heavily featured this as one of the subjects. The show is called You Are There. It is an early CBS show that covered history, and it took place in many different historical periods, and it's framed like a newscast taking place in that time. It's really interesting. I am hoping that you guys end up enjoying this. I saved this episode. I really wanted to watch this episode on stream or on video, so I decided to save this episode for today. So I'm hoping it's going to be really good. It's the signing of the Declaration of Independence. One thing you'll notice in this, it features Walter Cronkite, which that's a big name in news at the time. And the format of news as we know it today, we have a very similar format on newscasts that we did back then. And the format was just being defined at this time. So this is coming out just as like television news is still finding its look. So it's hard to see exactly what copied what exactly. Or maybe it's like kind of a symbiotic relationship between shows like this and the mainstream news as we know it today. This is CBS. It does feature the same guy. It's got Walter Cronkite at the forefront. So it's so interesting, and I'm very excited to check this out. It's a little bit long, 26 minutes, so this is the only video we're doing for this post show. We'll see how it works. All right, let's get started.
This is Walter Cronkite. Watch for You Are There and another dramatization of one of history's great events by tuning to this channel tonight. You Are There tonight.
So if you want to see this show, you can look it up. It's called You Are There, but you're not going to find every episode. Not every episode exists anymore, as far as we can tell. My professor, who wrote a book about this, tried to find them all. He couldn't. If all the episodes are out there, they're hard to find. So the few episodes that are there, I'm sure you'll find interesting. I think they had one on Socrates that I have not seen yet, but do intend on watching. I think somebody uploaded that to YouTube. So there's some interesting subjects that they take on. One interesting thing that I should point out: this is happening during the era of McCarthyism, where where America is really going after communists in entertainment. And this show is actually written by, I believe, three communist writers who were blacklisted and worked on this show anonymously or under a pseudonym. I'm not sure exactly which, but these are blacklisted writers that created this. So isn't that's I'm told that's supposed to like color the way that they frame this stuff, and a lot of the subjects that they take on often include groups that are being oppressed by larger systems. With Socrates, he's like speaking truth, and he has to drink poison for it. You can imagine how somebody who's being blacklisted in Hollywood might relate to that.
July 4th, 1776, the signing of the Declaration of Independence. You are there.
Walter Cronkite reporting July 4th, 1776. The notorious failure in diplomacy between Great Britain and her most powerful colonies in the Americas is today reaching a climax. The Declaration of Independence by the rebels will be submitted to a vote by what loyal Englishmen call a Congress of Traitors, all with their heads in the noose. At the moment, after a year of vacillation, the Continental Congress is about ready to proclaim a written document from which there will be no exit victory or utter submission to King George. 2 days ago, at a regular session of the Continental Congress, the following resolution was unanimously adopted. Quote, that these united colonies, that is, those in rebellion against Great Britain, are and of a right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British Crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. Quote closed. The question now remains whether or not this open claim of independence will not be followed by an outbreak of civil war in the colonies, where a good third of the inhabitants are still loyal citizens to the mother country.
That's the number that they typically give. Like a third of people were still loyal. A third of people might have been down for rebellion, and a third are, they could take it or leave it, or maybe they're on the fence, or maybe it doesn't really matter who's in charge as long as whoever's not going to bother me and let me live my life. It's not a perfect way of thinking about it, but if you really want to take it to like the simple route, that's how you break it down. Though there are more sophisticated ways of looking at it, but I'm guilty of giving this simple explanation for how the breakdowns go plenty of times.
Take utopia. All things are as they were then, except
You are there.
This is Ned Calmer, and we're in the State House, just outside the room where the Continental Congress has been meeting for these past...
So, like, this camera is in this time. This isn't just a fly on the wall from the future. This isn't, like, time-traveling stuff. This is framed as if the news cameras existed at the time and that CBS News existed at the time, and they're conducting this as if they were just there.
2 years. The delegates around the table inside
really cool.
are the drafting committee, which has submitted the Declaration of Independence, and a number of congressional leaders. Since yesterday, they've been meeting and recessing while changes are made in the document. Here comes Thomas Jefferson of Virginia, who wrote the document, and following him is Mr. Benjamin Franklin, another committee member.
So they didn't really know that Thomas Jefferson wrote, the general public didn't know that Thomas Jefferson wrote it until much later on. So there are going to be things that are changed for narrative purposes here. Thomas Jefferson wasn't able to hang his hat on that for a while. It wasn't really something he truly appreciated the fame of as much while he was still alive.
Let them hack it as they will. I have no stomach for it.
Well, the document must satisfy all the delegates.
It will end by expressing the will of none.
Well, when you assemble a number of men to have the advantage of their joined wisdom, you inevitably assemble with those men all their prejudices, their passions, their errors of opinions, their local interests, and their selfish views.
Mr. Franklin, sir, do you believe the Congress will agree on any document?
Of course, since they have no choice. And that reminds me of something that happened to a friend. He wanted to open a hat store, so he composed a sign which read, John Thompson, Hatter, makes and sells hats for ready money. He submitted it to his friends for their approval, and each one found something else in the sign superfluous, until in the end he had nothing left except the name Thompson and above it the picture of a hat.
Those critics in there will leave nothing but our name signed to a picture of a British gallows.
I don't know that anecdote. I don't know if that's an anecdote that Benjamin Franklin gave out normally. But I wouldn't be surprised if that was based on one that he actually did. He had so many ready stories. He always had something he could break out, and he's just one of those guys who was just apparently really awesome to listen to him talk. You ever have somebody who just has a story for everything you say? That seems like Ben Franklin. A story or a charming phrase or something like that. So he's communicating the idea that that the colonies are so different from one another, and that they have their own little desires or whatever, and it's going to really morph this document. But he's also expressing that they have to do it. So this is a document that's being built in compromise. This is a country being built in massive compromise. That's why we have so many loose ends as the country is getting started. It's a good thing the law worked under kind of a common law system, because it allowed for building upon it to happen naturally over time. So that's a very fortunate thing that America adopted the English common law system. But overall, it's quite the mess when you start looking into individual states and what they valued. Some valued slavery more than others and took extra steps to ensure their the preservation of slavery. And as the country began to develop, there are the slave owners are like putting their finger on the scale, and it's like, hey, we don't want to recognize enslaved people as people or citizens or anything like that, because they are supposed to be slaves. They're supposed to work for us and all that. But we do want them to be counted towards our state's representation. So everybody is full of crap. My state's also a problem. We wanted to print a lot of paper money and expected the other states to accept it, even though it was worth pretty much nothing. So, you know, we all have our own problems. Let's not say who tried to scam who using worthless paper money. Let's just get along together. Let's try to work this out.
I'll save what I can.
Oh, Mr. Jefferson, if you please, sir. Are they making many changes in the Declaration?
They are cutting it to bits,
For what reason, sir?
because no man can leave well enough alone. Our committee submitted the document. It embodies all that has been thought and said during these past years.
Are they making it stronger or weaker?
Weaker?
Will it affect the issue of independence?
No. That step was taken 2 days ago in our unanimous resolution. We are a new nation, sir. And what remains to be seen is whether the people will defend their independence or not. It lies completely with them, but the debate is over.
Well, then why the squabbling about the...
I find this guy interesting. He's very firm and well-spoken. And from what we know about Thomas Jefferson, he was not that. He was kind of timid. He was kind of nervous. But there is a little quirk that this guy seems to have. And I'm not sure if it's just the actor has this quirk, or there's something like deliberate about it. He keeps doing this thing where his eyes just flutter a little bit. I don't know if that's to represent a kind of nervousness. I don't know if he's thinking about that or not.
The document.
Men do not fight wars merely to fight,
Like, it's not just a blink. It's like a repeated flutter of the eyelids.
but out of need and principle. The document formalizes our purposes and our situation. It must express the resolution, the hopes, the necessity of 3 millions in this land who have not yet passed from the status of subjects of judge to free men with a nation of their own.
What will the nation be called?
The United States of America. But only the deity himself knows whether we are a nation united or disunited at this moment. We will be able to tell only when the document is taken into the homes of the people and not before.
I think this might just be like I feel like his blinking is deliberate, but I don't think it's a character thing. Now, the more I watch it, I think this might be a thing. Like, you can't stare down the lens like directly for too long. It gets eerie. It gets a little uncomfortable when you end up doing that. So maybe he's just consciously making sure like his eyes are moving, and I don't know. That might be just a deliberate decision, not from a character perspective, but like just how you are personable to a camera.
But only the deity himself knows whether we are a nation united or disunited at this moment. We will be able to tell only when the document is taken into the homes of the people and not before.
But Mr. Jefferson.
Jefferson.
All right, gentlemen. Excuse me, sir. I must now go in and calmly approve of the
To Frankfurt, a small town where we're going to sample
See, we got little jumps, we got little damages to the footage, and we had a little cut there. So this is not perfectly preserved.
public opinion on this historic day. Come in, Harry Marble.
Harry Marble here in the White Mane Inn in Frankfort, Pennsylvania, 5 miles north of Philadelphia. Modest country tavern right on the main road. It catches a certain amount of the Delaware traffic and some of the trade going west to the frontier country. We've picked this town because active recruiting for the Continental Army is going on here. This has aroused the deepest feelings pro and con on the question of war and independence. Pennsylvania, one of the proprietary colonies, belongs to the middle group that is about evenly divided between loyalists and rebels. Sir?
Yeah, the Pennsylvania is interesting. It's kind of like not perfectly a gateway to the South, but it falls very much in the middle of the country. So it always had a very unique politics between the North and South. Pennsylvania seems to be a little bit more complicated. At least I find it a little bit more politically complex than the North or South.
How do you stand, sir, on
That's just
independence for the colonies?
I haven't made up my mind.
What business are you in, sir?
The feed and grain.
Do you think it's right for the colonies to be free of English control?
Well, sir, to tell you the truth, I feel more like an American than an Englishman.
Were you born in the colonies?
In the Jerseys.
What will you
This is a guy kind of, I don't know if anybody would say it like outright like this, but there is something true about this because at this point, so many Americans had their families living on this land for so long. Some of them had not even been from England, and some of them had never been outside of their American colony. So it really is interesting how generations have kind of separated England and these English Americans. They are not exactly the same. England was hands off for so very long. There's more. There's a lot of representative government depending on like where you're from. It may vary and stuff, but there's representative government. People are kind of making their own way in the would-be United States. So they're finding their own sense of self, inspired by English identity, but building upon it. It's like a new branch on English identity, and a bunch of different branches going off of that because all the states are different in their own way.
do if English and Hessian troops invade your town to enforce the king's laws?
Fight, sir.
Thank you. Sir,
Good day, friend.
how do you feel about the war that seems to be breaking out over the question of independence?
Is this guy
dread it.
Quaker?
Is it a question of your religion?
We Quakers are opposed to war.
Are you for independence?
I am.
Thank you.
The Quakers were always a big problem. The government didn't really like them because they refused to fight. Quakers are pacifists by nature. That's just how they are. Many of them were pro-revolution, but they didn't want to like actively fight in the revolution. And it becomes a difficult thing where there's this big segment of certain populations and you can't really tap into their fighting potential because they're just not interested in fighting. So they ended up being frustrating for a lot of the people at the top of the the top end in high governing positions.
Sir, I'd like your views on independence.
He's probably a loyalist, right?
I am opposed to it, sir. It will lose us the power we have from our connection with the English throne.
What's your profession, sir?
I am an attorney, sir. I practice in Philadelphia. My feeling...
No, this guy's doing kind of a fluttery eye thing too. I think that's direction. I think that's something that they're being told to do.
...is that with moderation on both sides, we may reconcile with the mother country.
Well, how do you reconcile the actions of Great Britain on the questions of taxation and self-government?
Oh, the king has been wrongly advised. Time will cure these evils, while violence will only inflame them.
This is actually a pretty accurate representation of what a lot of colonists did think about the king. They actually really loved the king, but didn't really like Parliament. They wanted to be under the king, but like horizontal to Parliament, like have their own American Parliament or have their own wing of representation among Parliament, something along those lines, but not beneath Parliament. They hated Parliament. And not until Thomas Paine dropped Common Sense, which is the most popular pamphlet in American history, one of the most popular books in American history, if you account for like population size at the time, like right behind the Bible.
For reconciliation.
What about you, sir?
Patriot. Hardcore patriot.
I'm for the first man who buys me a drink.
What if the war comes here?
I will go there.
Gentlemen, I suppose you boys know what we're trying to find out.
Oh, these boys are volunteers, waiting for Captain Graydon.
Have you signed up yet?
Waiting to.
What do your parents say?
My father's just waiting until the fall harvest gets in, and he's going to join me.
What about you, son?
I'm going with Tom.
What does your father say?
Indians killed my father.
And your mother?
French killed her.
And now...
So with this guy, if his father was killed, I imagine he's very concerned with Native American policy. And people on the American side of things felt as if that the British and the Crown and all that, they were not concerned enough with those issues, and that they were just kind of overlooking the importance of Native American policy. A lot of them wanted to push west, and there were conflicts on the frontier, and they wanted support from the military, but they weren't getting the support that they wanted. So this guy has a very realistic motivation. This is actually very well written so far.
Now you're going to fight the British.
The way I feel, I don't want anybody coming in here with guns telling me what to do.
And you, sir, I suppose you're from western Pennsylvania?
Oh, yes, sir, from way past the fort at Pittsburgh. And I've come here with this, to join up with General Washington.
Why are you for independence?
Well, sir, out where I come from, where there's nothing but trees,
Spoon?
far as you can see. Well, it seems foolish to think of ourselves as anything but free and for ourselves. It's the wilderness that makes us independent.
Ooh. Who dat?
Neighbor!
Sir, we're making a survey of opinion in this region.
What opinion, sir?
Your opinion of the resolution of July 2nd by the Continental Congress proclaiming the colonies independent of Great Britain.
My opinion, sir, is that it's humbug. Hear, hear, hear. Well, we have an audience of patriots here, eh? English ones. My compliments to the gentlemen. Serve them what they wish. Hear!
This is, that's actually really funny. This is very daring of him, because a lot of people who, if they were loyalist, were better to just be quiet about it, because many of them found themselves harassed. A lot of them had their property damaged. If you stood loudly against the revolution, revolutionaries might go after you. Despite the fact that revolutionaries were still a minority in America, they were very loud, they were very passionate, and they were willing to take action.
Thank you, sir.
I take it, sir, that you are a Tory.
A loyalist, sir. Born and bred in this colony, educated in part at home and at Cambridge, England.
And I suppose...
A Tory is a word that you'd be familiar with if you're English, but it kind of has, I suppose in some ways it has a negative context over there too, but it had a really negative context over here. Yeah.
Suppose you're not impressed by the resolution of Congress.
I am not, nor should anyone by a gang of pettifogging lawyers, bankrupt shopkeepers, and outlawed smugglers. I only regret, sir, that this action
Outlawed
by an
smugglers. Ooh, he's bringing up the Navigation Acts here. The Navigation Acts were something that the British instituted to crack down on smuggling. A lot of Americans smuggled in Dutch tea, which was cheap for the time. But then when the East India Company, which was a British tea company, they ended up getting a monopoly in the colonies as they cracked down on smuggled Dutch tea. So a lot of people may end up losing a little bit of money off the process of that, despite the fact that the taxed British tea would cost a little bit less. You are skimming away from the business of some people who may have participated in that smuggling. We have like John Hancock, who apparently participated in some of that.
Minority will
Big
cause
signature
civil
guy.
war and disaster.
You don't seem to be afraid to express your opinions in public.
Sir, they may ride a poor bailiff on the rail or burn the goods of a merchant, but I assure you that this rebel in arms will not molest me. Well, lads, you hear what a gentleman says? Do you see how these Liberty Boys operate on the minds of those too young to understand? Here they are, ready to go off and be killed for independence.
I mean, that's how the military works. You recruit young because they are brash and less likely to ask questions in a lot of ways. It's not consistent across the board. You have plenty of young people who are very inquisitive and stuff. But I think they find it easier to just ingrain unquestioning loyalty in a young mind. And of course, there's the power of youth in general.
Where in the whole world, sir, is there more
Young and
independence
healthy.
than that of the Englishman under the British Constitution?
I agree, sir. And I would say that these lads could help their country more by helping us quiet the hotheads and aiding in reconciliation.
Sir, are you for suppressing the rebellion by force?
I cannot forbear to wish, sir, that this commotion would end without it, and that these rebels would be subdued by terror rather than bloodshed.
You think, mister, you can subdue me by terror? I'm for rebellion.
I was not addressing you, sir.
Fight!
But I was talking to you.
Mind your manners, you Indian, when you speak to a gentleman.
Yeah. Some campy fight scenes.
Recruiting for the Continental Army to follow under General Washington and chase the Hessians and the Redcoats from our shore. Here I am with money to pay and a gun for every patriot. Now step right.
They promised money, so not everybody got paid. And not everybody had the resources they needed. I don't know how much, like, they promised up front, but I don't know how much they were able to deliver. Maybe in the early days they might have been able to deliver a little bit more, but people got tired, and they weren't forking over money quite as willingly as they did at the
Get up
beginning.
to Captain Graydon and sign your name, and off we'll go.
How dare you, sir, recruit for a rebellion? Why, you seem like a gentleman and officer.
How dare you, sir, stand in the way of the will of the free and independent American nation?
I will write my name down for it. Right.
This guy's all over the place.
Just sign up.
Make an X.
Hurry up now.
You don't have to read it. You don't have to read it. You can't read anyway.
Why, you're a dirty dog of a Liberty boy.
I don't think we can find out anything else at the moment. Come in, Ned Calmer in Philadelphia.
This is Ned Calmer back in the State House anteroom in Philadelphia. The delegates are returning.
Isn't this brilliant? I want to check out more of these. I'm maybe next time we'll check out the Socrates one. Socrates. I say Socrates sometimes, and people think I'm an idiot in the comments, and they don't know that I'm referencing a movie.
For the reopening of the session to consider Jefferson's statement of independence. That is Mr. Samuel Adams, a delegate from Massachusetts.
Sammy boy!
Mr. Alsop from New York. He is personally against the resolution and the document on independence. The young man with him is Edward Rutledge of South Carolina. He's 26, the youngest member of Congress. He helped organize the opposition to the resolution on independence, but finally voted for it. And here is Mr. John Dickinson of Pennsylvania, the leader of the opposition to independence.
Yeah, a lot of the time when they're conducting votes where people are divided, people who would otherwise fight against the vote will flip towards the end in order to create an air of unanimity, because if they're going forward with this, they don't want to go forward with it divided. They're going to not be able to do it as effectively in that case. So if they are unanimous, they will be able to be more powerful going forward. This happens a lot in like primary elections for the presidency. Sometimes, well, early on, before primaries look the way they do today, people would flip their votes in order to push towards a more unanimous vote for a presidential candidate that they're putting forward, so that it looks like the whole party is behind the one person, even though the whole party wasn't behind them until that day.
Independence in the colonies. Oh, Mr. Dickinson. All of the delegates are not yet here. Only Mr. Dickinson, of all those here, did not vote for independence. Just what his role will be here today is not known. That's John Hancock, president of the Congress, who's arguing with Mr. Jefferson.
It is my opinion, sir, that the whole passage on the matter of slavery must be omitted.
And why, sir? Why continue what we know is wrong?
We know it is an abomination.
The last speaker was John Adams.
Let me read it.
There was originally a condemnation of slavery, but they didn't really have anything they were going to do about slavery. Like, there wasn't any actual plan to get rid of slavery. So, first of all, they really had nothing to back up that statement. They didn't have the political will to back up that statement and put their money where their mouth is. But also, they didn't want to alienate the southern slave-owning states. And that's interesting because Thomas Jefferson was a slave owner. He had hundreds of slaves, and he was a southerner.
To you again and tell me if it helps or hinders independence.
Gentlemen,
Benjamin Franklin.
we are not met here to condemn all the abominations with which human beings amuse themselves, but only those which hinder us from independence.
That is, sir. Permit me. Mr. Richards, will you please close the doors? The document goes on about King George. He has waged cruel war against human nature itself, violates most sacred rights of life and liberty in the persons of distant people who never offended him, captivating and carrying them into slavery in another hemisphere, or to incur miserable death on their transportation hither. And so it goes on. I do not think, gentlemen, that that paragraph will aid us in the South.
I'm from the South. I own slaves, and yet I would gladly end the practice.
If I may.
One defense of Thomas Jefferson, and I don't think he needs any more defenders really, but it was difficult to emancipate your slaves in the South in a lot of ways. They created laws to make it harder to emancipate enslaved people. They didn't want free black people running around being citizens and owning property and making a way for themselves. They actually made it harder. When people were freed, they often had to leave the state within like a certain amount of time. So that's another problem that they end up having. Or they would end up being recaptured. So if they weren't able to make a life for themselves outside of the state, then they're just back to square one. So an individual freeing their slaves was difficult. And could require an immense use of resources. Otherwise, I think Thomas Jefferson was just all talk. Like I said, I don't think he needs too many defenders because he already has so many defenders. I think there's plenty to condemn him for, but it's good to acknowledge that it was difficult to free enslaved people in Virginia in particular.
While I have been opposed to immediate independence,
Nevertheless, I voted for to maintain unanimity, without which we
There we
cannot
go.
survive the present struggle with Great Britain. But I assure you, gentlemen, if you include this paragraph, you will exclude from our forces those who have most bitterly opposed the king.
Well, Mr. Jefferson?
We can take it to a vote.
But let us avoid voting on all minor issues.
You call slavery a minor issue?
As opposed to liberty and survival of the new nation, yes.
He says liberty as if it has nothing to do with slavery. And I find this interesting. Benjamin Franklin's gonna come out harder against slavery in his old years. He's already getting old, but not too long after independence. Not too long after the end of the war with Great Britain, he's gonna come out very hard against slavery. And Thomas Jefferson, he's going to be president, and he's not really going to do anything.
Besides, this will not only be slaveholders in the South who will oppose us, but merchants and ship owners of New England who have done more than the king to further this abominable practice.
Very well, remove it.
And now there is the next paragraph, attacking the English people. We have no need to antagonize them.
Even while they assassinate us?
The purpose of this document is to aid us in our cause, not to hinder us.
Strike it out.
Jefferson did have kind of a radical bend to him. He's going to end up supporting the French Revolution for quite some time. It's going to take him a while. Like, even after blood is being spilt all over the friggin' country, he's going to take a while to actually come out and be like, oh yeah, this is getting pretty messed up. Like, he's the guy who came up with the quote, like, every generation or whatever, the tree of liberty has to be, what is it? Fed with the blood of tyrants and patriots. It's natural fertilizer or something like that. I don't know. I don't remember the exact quote. It's been a while since I've read it.
I advise it.
I agree. Let us but agree.
I would like to suggest, gentlemen...
A new cause for division and diversion?
Sir?
Sir, we are making a revolution. We have no time for further vacillation.
You, Mr. Hancock, are the president of this assembly. I urge you to postpone the vote on the declaration. There is no need for this document.
We know this gentleman's opinion.
You do not, for you have never listened to them, only to your own. 2 days ago, against my advice and without my vote, this Congress adopted a resolution for independence. Very well, now we are free. We are generally declared free. How this will aid us in the present struggle, I do not know. But I do know that if we publish this long and involved document, you will find every word and sentence will find 1,000 to disagree, as we disagree here. This document will create division, not unity. It will serve each man as his reason why he is against independence.
Well, sir, we are removing these phrases and clauses which would cause dissension.
The document will cause dissension. Its very existence will do it.
Is it my understanding that you are saying independence will be hurt by the publication of this document?
By its very passage. We have declared for independence. Now let us get it by battle. Of what use are the words which can only cause disagreement and strain among ourselves, while they unite our enemies?
Well, what do you say, gentlemen? Shall we go over the document again and judge it again? There is much weight in Mr. Dickinson's statement. And while he has been for reconciliation, his patriotism is undeniable.
Not for me. Not for me.
I should like to hear from Samuel Adams on this whole affair. And like the rest of us, Sam Adams knows what's going on in the streets and on the farms, where the people who will have to fight and who are fighting live.
Sam Adams was one of the strongest organizers when it came to, like, actual action being taken in the streets against the British occupation of Boston. He got down in the nitty-gritty. As far as, like, all these, like, stuffy shirt people go, he is probably the most genuine revolutionary among them. Not just a revolutionary with the pen, but a revolutionary like getting in the street and taking rebellious action.
What do you say, Sam?
By the Prohibition Act, the King, Lords, and Parliament have thrust these colonies from them. It makes us independent in spite of ourselves. Let us admit it.
John. Sam. Mr. Dickinson, as you know, I infrequently speak in Congress. I'm not elf. I know only the facts.
We know that you alone, almost by yourself, have created the revolution in Boston.
I wish it were true. I admit I have longed for American independence.
Sam Adams he would be considered by many to be a grand founding father, because like for a while people are fighting against the British in a less formalized manner. There are open acts of rebellion, and those are started by like the first generation of revolutionaries like Samuel Adams. A lot of the people who come along during the time of the Congress, they're like a completely new generation of people. And a lot of the people who come up during the war, many of which would be considered founding fathers, are so young compared to like the Samuel Adams of the world, who's already been doing this for so long before everybody else hops on.
I agree with my cousin that it's the King and Parliament who have given it to us by their actions. I cannot conceive of one good reason that can be assigned against the Declaration. Will it widen the breach? That would be a strange question after we've raised armies and fought battles with British troops and set up an American Navy. I tell you, sir, the Tories dread a declaration of independence more than death. For a declaration will create unity.
The Tories will welcome it.
No, sir, they will not.
General Washington is against independence and has not come out for it. He knows that it is better to fight and win and then declare it.
It is no longer true, sir. I have here a letter from William Palfrey, who writes that Washington has declared that when he first took command, he abhorred the idea of independence. But he's now fully convinced that nothing else can save us. Why is this? Because he must lead troops into battle. They will not die for the lesser cause. Men will only die for their ideal of human conduct. And the Tories know this.
And they also know what it will mean for us among our possible allies.
Precisely. And Silas Deane has written from Paris, where he's endeavoring to obtain guns and money for us, that a mere resolution of independence will be only considered a preliminary step in the proper direction. Until a decisive step is taken, he can do nothing. We need allies. We need to unify the patriots. But most of all, we need a sense that there is no turning back. A declaration will assure this to the full.
Hear, hear.
Mr. Hancock, now let's call this Congress into session and get on with the work of liberty and war.
Gentlemen, take your places. The recess is terminated.
You may get on with the work without me.
We will read the amended declaration and vote upon it. Gentlemen, take your places. We've wasted enough.
Hey, dude, you all
Mr.
right?
Dickinson,
Yes?
is there any further statement you wish to make?
Yes, sir. I resent this patriotism. I was among the very first men on this continent who, by open and decided steps, staked his life and fortune on my country's cause. But it was my own life. I do not as freely offer the lives and fortunes of others. I do not see the need of informing the enemy of our ultimate aims. Foreign aid will be gained only by victories in the field. We ought to know what aid will be forthcoming before we take the step. We should fight from local governments acceptable by the people. We should first form a national government on which we can all agree. And I can only say, sir, that I disagree, and I go now to join my regiment and fight the enemy. Let the rest of them talk as they will. If they are right, history will sustain them. If they are wrong,
History will blame all of us. In any event, sir, my lot is with the patriots, right or wrong.
It's being carried!
Dude.
It's being carried!
Where is the vote of Rhode Island? Rhode Island votes aye. South Carolina?
Hey, my state.
Aye. What is the vote of Virginia on this Declaration of Independence as read to us this day?
Virginia votes aye.
The vote is unanimously carried.
I move, sir. I move.
Dude, I wish we had shows like this. Like, I feel like a lot of good history entertainment doesn't really... Like, I feel like we have... There must be some sort of a demand for it. I think shows like Drunk History are fantastic, despite some faults that there are in the history of some moments. It's kind of... You kind of accept that because these are drunk people telling history, but like it kind of shows that there is some sort of audience that wants to find amusement in history. But we have like the History Channel's like garbage, and like there's not always a lot to work with. I think YouTube might be the best place for this sort of history entertainment, and there are some creators who've really stepped up, but I would love to see more stuff like this make its way into the mainstream. Something of this variety, at least.
I move, sir, that the Declaration be authenticated and printed, that a committee be appointed to superintend and correct the press, that copies of the Declaration be sent to the several assemblies, conventions, and committees or councils of public safety, and to the several commanding officers of the Continental troops, that it be proclaimed in each of the United States and at the head of the army.
Second. The motion is unanimous.
We must be unanimous. There must be no pulling different ways. We must all hang together.
Yes, indeed, we must hang together, or most assuredly we shall all hang separately.
Apparently he did say that.
Gentlemen, let us review the words
morbid.
of this declaration. When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or to abolish it, and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence, indeed, will dictate that governments...
They're just reading the whole thing here. I'm gonna let this play out.
...long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses and usurpations, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
So the great Declaration of Independence came into existence, and with it, this nation. That night it went to press, and while the great seal of the new nation was designed, the document went around the country and into the world, lighting the fire of liberty ever higher. John Adams always thought that July 2nd was a more important date than July 4th. In 40 years later, no one could remember when it was that everyone signed. The historians are still arguing these points, but for the people of the world, for Americans, it's the letter and spirit of the magnificent principles that count, the profound basic thought that each one of us is entitled to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that governments exist for their peoples and not peoples for governments. What sort of a day was it? A day like all days, filled with those events that alter and illuminate our times. And you were there.
Dude, that was amazing. Okay, I'm gonna get it there. That was wonderful. I'm so glad that this was brought to my attention, and I want to watch all of these if I can. Yeah, I'm very excited to move forward with this as maybe a semi-regular thing until I've run out of episodes to watch, of course. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well. We'll see what YouTube says about it. It's very likely that this is going to be demonetized. It's not technically public domain at this point, but it's very possible that CBS isn't really looking for uploads of this thing. So, who knows? As long as it's not, like, removed from the channel or I get no strikes or anything like that, as long as that's the case, then I'm fine with it. I hope you all enjoyed this video. I had a ton of fun with this, and I had a ton of fun with the stream I did earlier. And I'm going to be doing more live streams every Sunday. So, well, as many Sundays as I can. You know, stuff happens. Sometimes we do things on Sunday. But when I'm not doing stuff on Sundays, I'm going to be streaming. So, thank you all for watching. Thank you, my dearest members who continue to support the channel. It really means a ton that you continue to do so. Despite the ups and downs of the channel, it really does help to have that little bit of extra money. I've just invested in some new equipment for some new videos I'm going to be working on going forward. We'll see how well they go. I hope they're half as good as this, though, because this was amazing. So, thank you all for watching. I'll be back with the next live stream on Sunday, and there will hopefully be another post show. I'm going to try to do these as consistently as I can. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next week. I don't know what I'm going to be doing for the next post show. I'll find out when I get there. But if you have any suggestions, feel free to leave them. So, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.